Hello, everyone, and welcome back. What important perspectives we heard in the opening keynote. Student parents sharing their experiences and their expert recommendations on how colleges could support more student parents and support them more effectively, and accelerating economic and social mobility for whole families. I'm Meredith Hatch. I serve as a Senior Associate Director at Achieving the Dream, and the topic of our next session is a deep dive into programs that effectively support student parents. And so really, we're going to dive into how programs can be best designed to support parenting students. Throughout this session, you'll hear about programs across the country. When you're learning today, think about how you might adapt and adopt different design elements of these programs within your own campuses, within your own context. Think about the design of targeted, equitable supports. As I make introductions, I'm going to ask my co-moderator and panelists to turn on their videos and their microphones. As Dr. Stout mentioned today, as she opened today's summit, we at ATD are joined in our efforts by the Community College Women Succeed Advisory Group, made up of leaders from across the country. So I'm joined in this session by co-moderator Nicole Lynn Lewis. She is the CEO of Generation Hope in Washington, D.C. And in the chat of this next session, you'll hear from other members of our Community College Women Succeed Advisory Group. So Sandy Goodman, who is the director of NCTN at World Education, and Jennifer Zeisler, who is a senior program director for career readiness at ECMC Foundation. Sandy and Jennifer, please feel free to say hello in the chat. Finally, it is my pleasure to introduce our featured speakers in this session. So, if you haven't already, please do turn on your videos and microphones. So first, Anne Hofman. She is an associate professor of English and the English department chair, as well as the Parents Lead Faculty Innovator at Frederick Community College in Maryland. We're also joined by Sheridan McNeil. She is the Career and Technical Education Director at United Tribes Technical College in North Dakota. Also from United Tribes Technical College is Chelsea Kuhlman. Chelsea is the social worker at Theodore Jamerson Elementary School. And our final featured speaker is Rachel Kubczak. Rachel is a life coach, as well as the program director at the Life Impact Program at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. Now that we have our co-moderator and panelists with their videos and audio on, let's begin. So today's session really focuses on programs that make a difference for student parents. So for each of our speakers, what is an example of why the work that you do to support student parents has made an impact at your institution? And we'll start with Anne Hofman.
Good afternoon. I'm so excited to be here today. Thank you for such a nice introduction, Meredith. So I am really excited to share some details and structural frameworks from our program called Parents Lead at Frederick Community College. And I would say that the impact that Parents Lead specifically has had at Frederick Community College has been in two pieces. I've seen incredible impact on students, as well as in our broader institution. And I could tell you multiple stories. I know everyone on this call probably has their favorite student stories to share. But I would say in general, I've seen an incredible increase in self-advocacy and political agency among my students. They're not just my students, our students. And we heard Rashika and Jesus and Yaslin speak to this a little bit about how coming to the college experience, they didn't want to ask for help. They weren't used to asking for help. And I've seen a change in students in that way. And not just asking for help, but saying, I expect this. And as a student, I need this. And then that transforming into leadership on our campus and the ways in which their visibility has been really inspiring to other adult learners and student parents. And that's been incredible, presenting at conferences alongside faculty being visible in the not just on campus, but also in news stories where they've been featured in our community. And in the broader institution, I've seen a reminder of the deep value of the student-faculty relationship, because our program really has emerged from faculty advocacy for student parents. And a lot of times these initiatives are rolled out from other parts of the college. And because ours rolled out from academic affairs, there's been a lot of energy from faculty to be able to be part of giving voice and amplifying student voice of student parents. So those are the impacts that I've seen at my institution.
That's terrific, Anne. Thank you so much. So really elevating and amplifying the student voice. And next, Sheridan McNeil, a little bit about the impact at your institution. Sheridan, as you're able to turn on your video and microphone, we'll move to Chelsea Kuhlman.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm I actually am located on the United Tribes campus. I'm an elementary school, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how I see impact at our institution. So TJAS works with a very transient population. Most of our students move from their respective reservations to attend school at UTTC. So this transition requires TJS and UTTC to work together to support parents. Together, we provide a community within a community and resources to promote health and support. So some supports that we offer include like resource and referral, parent involvement activities, parent-child interaction, early childhood intervention, daycare, transportation, food pantry, on and on and on. But parent involvement and wraparound services has proven to impact TJS student success the most. So family engagement is one way that we gauge that. In schools, it helps improve achievement, reduces absenteeism, restores parents' confidence in their child's education. And then children with involved parents or caregivers earn higher grades, test scores, and have better skills, social skills, and show improved behavior. When a parent can fully engage and utilize the services available to them, it allows them to be more present and engage in their child's education more. That engagement is what impacts both the success of the parent and the child.
Thank you so much, Chelsea, for that amazing perspective. Thinking about impacts on the whole family, as you have seen at your institution, as our keynote and student panelists described. So thank you for that perspective. And finally, we'd love to hear from Rachel about that impact that you've made at your institution.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Kubczak from the Life Impact Program at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I'm excited to be here today and share some information about our program and how we support student parents on our campus. So I think first I wanted to just give a little bit of background about Life Impact. The Life Impact Program serves low-income students with children through scholarship and support services. Scholars in our program receive a $2,000 renewable scholarship and access to a life coach team. All of our scholars have experienced generational poverty. Most are single moms, almost all are first generation students, identify as public school graduates, and students of color. So the impact I've seen with our program at our institution is it's really empowered parents and improved their family's overall economic and social success. I also wanted to share some statistics with you that I think are really important. So our program graduation and retention rate is 85%. And in comparison to our university's graduation rate, it's 42%. And it's even lower for non-traditional students of color. We have a strong number of student parents who pursue graduate level degrees upon graduation. During this last spring semester, spring 2020, we had 10 graduates from our program. 5 of them went on to pursue graduate level degrees, 3 of them staying at UWM. So not only is our program impacting our institution, but it's also positively impacting our community, as we find that most students want to stay in the greater Milwaukee area and give back to their communities.
Thank you so much, Rachel, not only for describing your program, but also thinking about the huge connection that you have with your community, and that your students are staying within your community and making a huge positive impact. So thank you for describing that component of your work. So next question, and this is for Anne. In your experience and based on your students' experiences, are there new or different supports that may be needed as parenting students progress throughout their academic journeys? And we know that not all journeys look the same. So Anne, if you could describe that.
Sure. So I don't propose to know everything about every program that is out there. So I can speak from my experiences at my institution as a student parent, and then also as someone who has spoken with people at other institutions, that it does seem like there are sort of two gaps. There's a systemic top-down gap that requires the reevaluation of broader supports that we heard Dr. Stout talk a little bit about in the keynote, right? And that's not necessarily new, but I think it's a lensing of student parents in an equity framework that's not happening at all institutions. And then there's this grassroots piece where I think we really need to listen to the boots on the ground, our faculty and our students, for building programs, right, for them, because most of our programs at community colleges are not built for the populations that we serve, as that student parents often occupy. Community colleges historically have been built for middle-class students, right? And so as we're looking at the profile of student parents, we can't be coy about who we're serving. We can't be moving through with colorblind models of education. And so I think it's really important that we look at bring faculty to the table who are interested in being part of this work. And oftentimes faculty get a bad rap for good reason, for not being flexible. But there are a lot of champions of student parents and of equity work that I think has yet to be mined in our institutions. And so I think that we have to obviously include understanding all of the intersecting issues that go into being a student parent. One thing I will say that I think is is a different approach, is to think about this as DEI work, right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and bring folks to the table in that way. So.
And you talked about faculty flexibility. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like at Frederick Community College, perhaps even in your classroom?
Sure. So I actually teach the English 101 class in the Parents Lead program. So we know that English 101 is a gatekeeping class for a lot of students. It's also required for every program. And so having someone in the classroom who understands the student parent experience and is willing to be flexible, and I don't just mean with deadlines, I mean in terms of understanding what kind of information and how do adults learn differently from traditional students. I really don't like the dichotomy of traditional versus non-traditional, but it's true. There are different kinds of learners. And as adults, we have different needs. So training our faculty to understand what that looks like developmentally is a really, really important component of success in the classroom for student parents.
Thanks, Anne. I think that that's a really critically important point. And I'm curious if any of our other panelists would like to follow up on that specific component of the work. So engaging faculty. Okay. And so now I'll pass it to Nicole. She, as a nonprofit leader who's doing exceptional work with institutions across the entire Washington, D.C. region, has a really critical perspective here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Meredith. And this is great to be moderating this conversation. It's so good to be a part of this event. Anytime we're having conversations about student parents, I get really excited. And it's great to see familiar faces. So Anne, nice to see you beyond our Twitter exchanges, and also so great to hear from parents in the first session or the previous session. Yaslin is actually one of our scholars at Generation Hope. So we've had the honor of helping her in her college journey, as well as her transition from Montgomery College to University of Maryland. And I know both Rashika and Jesus from being connected through the Ascend program at the Aspen Institute. So it's just great to be here with you all today. Before I launch into the question, I just want to give quick background on Generation Hope so you all see kind of the perspective that we're bringing to the conversation. We're a community-based organization in the DC region. And for the past 10 years, we've been helping teen parents get their college degrees at 20 different 2- and 4-year schools in our region. And so we have been on the other side of the fence, really doing this work, helping our students navigate various institutions to get to the graduation stage. We're now launching national work to advocate for the needs of student parents all across the country. And so we're really excited, again, to see conversations like these happening. I love what you just said, Anne, about the connection, connecting student parent work to DEI work. It's something that I often say is that student parent work is race equity work, and really helping people to think about it differently. And also to not necessarily think about this population as completely disconnected from the other populations that we're talking about, honestly, more frequently. There's so much intersectionality between student parents and other groups, first-generation college students and students of color and low-income students. It's just really thinking more holistically about how we provide these supports. So I'm curious, when you're thinking about racial equity priorities at your institutions, how does your work build community for student parents, and how do you kind of build on those racial equity commitments, and how you make sure that this community can connect with each other, and again, really build community with each other? And Rachel, I'll toss that to you.
Yeah, so we've worked really hard to build strong partnerships with other student resource centers on campus, and have identified liaisons at these centers who have an understanding of the unique needs that student parents have. I always think, especially when it comes to supporting students' mental health needs. So for example, if a student parent is struggling with their mental health, we can connect them with a counselor at our university counseling center directly. This eliminates the student needing to call the center, go through triage, set up an appointment, this lengthy process. They don't necessarily get priority over other students, but at least we are helping them to make a connection and not sending them somewhere without our advocacy or support. Students, when I think about building community too, all students in our program have access to a life coach team. They're actually required to meet with the life coach team 1 to 2 times per semester minimally. And the life coach team assesses barriers, provides resources, referrals, and support. We're always assessing students' well-being by asking them how they manage their stress, what their coping mechanisms are, where they get support on campus and at home. I also think about, with community, this idea of and the combination with mental health and equity and diversity, hosting parent and family centered workshops. And we do that over the course of an academic year. So often times workshops will be focused on topics related to parenting. And then we also try and offer 1 to 2 workshops a year that focus on the well-being of the student. So for example, we've hosted how to build healthy relationships, facilitated by our University Counseling Center, as well as workshops on adults and children, yoga with kids. Most recently this October, we hosted a workshop on how children learn about race and how adults can help them. That was really well attended. And I hope we offer that one again. So I think access to resources, events focused on well-being of the student parent, and then support from the life coach team, as well as other campus centers, really help build that, create a community for students on campus, and help support them, their overall well-being.
I love that. And I think to your point around the mental health supports that you're providing, I think it speaks to David's point earlier around the one-stop shop, and we have brought mental health supports on staff at Generation Hope for our students, and it has really been game-changing. It has removed the barriers for them to access those supports in the community and in various ways by just making it another layer of services that we provide. I think it's really been helpful for us too, because we've much like your program, I'm sure you've built the trust with these students. And so that again helps to remove some of that stigma and some of that kind of anxiety around perhaps accessing mental health supports. And so it's so important that we also make relationships and building trust really key. The other thing I'd add to that, I love all of the different ways that you guys are building community. And I love that you're thinking about how do we not only build community among our students, but with their children. And making sure that there are child-friendly options available. We released a toolkit last month for higher ed to really begin to think about these things, and we had some ideas for that. And there are also formal ways to build community, but I was just talking to one of our program staff members earlier today, and we were talking of, we have family dinners where our families come together and share with one another and honestly vent. And it is really about them coming together and helping each other solve their parenting challenges and leaning on each other. And one thing that we've really noticed in this pandemic is just having the opportunity to come together and talk to other people who are going through some of the same things that you're going through. The pressure that we all have on us as parents and caregivers right now in the midst of COVID-19 is intense. And so those sessions have been really helpful in building community as well. So love all of the things that you all are doing. I'm going to shift over to community partnerships because we are a community-based organization. And so I think community partnerships are really key for institutions as they're thinking about growing their student-parent work. If you could give me an example of a community partnership you have at your institution that helps you better support student parents, and what does it take to make that happen? I can tell you at Generation Hope, as I said, we work with 20 different 2- and 4-year schools in our region, and we have wonderful partnerships. For example, Montgomery College is such an amazing partner to us. We have been formally kind of partnering with them on providing case management, outsourcing our case management to them during the pandemic for any of the students that they identify that might need that extra support. But we also support parenting college students at Montgomery College. And we really have worked very closely with Dr. Darian Pollard and Dr. Monica Brown on how to help them expand their student parent support. So that's just one example of how we as a community-based organization have really partnered with an institution to help them strengthen and enhance their work. But curious, again, what are examples of community partnerships that you all have at your institutions that help you better support student parents, and what does it really take to make sure that those are successful? And I'll toss it to you, Chelsea.
Okay, thank you. So I work with parents in many different capacities as a social worker at an elementary school on a college campus. So one of the programs that we have is called Stay in School. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And this addresses student attendance at our school. So TJS, with its Stay in School team, we participate in campus community effort to impact attendance through preventative and early intervention services to students and families in order to create a positive experience between homeschool and campus community services. So it was developed in an effort to reduce absences and tardies and increase school attendance, as well as build relationships between school and families. So the goal is to work with the family as a team to determine barriers and any circumstances causing the increase of absences and tardies, and also for the team to work with the family to discuss and determine a plan to improve attendance. So this multidisciplinary team consists of our school principal, myself, our school guidance counselor, our school SRO, a child protection worker, our UTTC security, and UTTC wellness counselors. It's a proactive approach really to allow families to not only address the attendance concerns, but also build a support system with our school and within the college. They have access to community resources, and they're able to address any mental health or basic needs that they may have. Some things that we're seeing that show evidence of that is since 2016, from 2016 to 2020, 98 out of 102 families were able to avoid educational neglect or compulsory charge.
Wow.
This is because within the stay in school policy, we are able to detect earlier and any attendance concerns with the family the following years and be more proactive in addressing those issues with the families. So when a 960 or compulsory is filed, and that's our hope not to, but if it is filed, those active efforts in communication are already documented. The family is more comfortable working with a child protection worker because there is one on our team who's able to guide them through what the next steps will look like. They also have a more positive experience by having bridged that the communication is built, that bridge of communication is built, and they're more willing to follow up with recommended services. So this really opens the door for also our wellness services on campus to provide counseling, those medical needs, any food or basic needs, drug and alcohol addiction, anything like that. And then the Stay in School program, really, it just started as a pilot program in 2006. And from there, it has really grown to be one of our best wraparound services provided from our school, that we work with the college, we work with the community, and we could not do it without our college or our community helping us.
It's wonderful. Such a great example of all the right people talking to each other and being in communication. It reminds me of, I think, at another Achieving the Dream convening, we were chatting about even when schools close down because of weather-related issues and they're not talking to colleges and everybody's not all on the same page. How difficult it is as a student parent to, get to class if there's a snowstorm and the school has been shut down for your child, but your college is still kind of, is not working on the same page as maybe your child's public school or school. So such a great example. I love that. Rachel, curious if you have an example of a community partnership at your institution and what it has taken to make it successful.
Yeah, so we really have more of a encouraging campus buy-in. So UWM is a school of about 27,000, and there's roughly 1,300 student parents on our campus that we know of, and that's based on the FAFSA. So we're really a small program on a large campus, and we really need the support of our campus partners to spread the word about student parent supports that exist at our university. So over the years, we've identified centers on our campus that share a similar mission with us, and we work with those centers to help elevate that shared mission. So for us, partnering with our childcare center on campus, the Women's Resource Center, and the Center for International Education are big ones for us. We co-host events throughout the year, we share resources, we share the same students, and ultimately we share that same mission of supporting students' well-being overall. I think part of the campus buy-in comes from maintaining connections and inviting campus partners to our events to demonstrate our success. One example that comes to mind when thinking about campus buy-in is every year we host a pinning ceremony for our graduating scholars. It's our biggest event of the year, and we always invite campus and community supports. We also encourage students to invite professors, advisors, or other supports on campus to attend. I think it's probably the most unique event that's held on our campus. We have students walk down an aisle like they would at graduation. Only during our ceremony, they're escorted by their children. They get to sit with their families. We have student speakers share their stories about what it took to get to graduation, which rarely leaves a dry eye in the room. We connect over snacks and cake afterwards. Kids run around. It's a ton of fun. But the feedback we get from our staff and faculty that attend is how amazing our students are and how powerful the work we are doing is. So I think gaining the campus buy-in, creating the partnerships is really done by inviting campus supporters to the table and showing them how resilient and strong student parents are, and why it's so important to support these students on our campuses.
I love that, Rachel. And I think such a great point about not only collaboration with community partners outside of an institution, but also the collaboration that really is necessary within an institution. And love the pinning ceremony. We do a big celebration of our scholars at Generation Hope. There's not a dry eye in the room. We have their children with wearing little graduation caps, and it is just amazing for them. It's awesome for us to celebrate them, but also I think to your point, really raises awareness about how incredible and how motivated student parents are. And so kudos to you for that event on so many levels. It sounds incredible. Meredith, I will toss it back to you.
Thank you so much. And so on that note, we've been talking about the incredible talents and skills that student parents have. And we've talked about getting buy-in in the community and within the campus community. So I do want to ask a question about how do you fight some of the common misconceptions that others on campus or in the community have about student parents? So kind of naming what these misconceptions have been, and then second, how you've combated these specific misconceptions. I know that that Anne talked about this in the beginning when she talked about engaging with other faculty and others on campus. So Anne, we'll start with you.
Sure. So if you don't mind me circling back quickly, Meredith, I think when you asked me the last question, I missed an opportunity to just share some of the really important components of reaching this population. And I think it also answers in part your question. So if you don't mind, I just wanted to mention that some of the things we do to meet or to counter some of the expectations that there are of student parents, particularly single mothers who are fighting a reputation of being somehow irresponsible or not having their life together, or of this deficit model of thinking about student parents. And so we've created a community of learners through our Parents Lead program. So there's a cohort where students feel supported. They can advocate with themselves, among themselves, and with other and to faculty. They have financial support through scholarships that also helps to give some or rewrite this idea that students, if not given sort of being monitored in terms of how they spend money, that they won't do it responsibly. And so we don't attach our dollars to anything. And students have been really successful in showing the ways they've creatively found childcare. We've also have a curricular model that is a pathway for them to follow in predictable ways. They know if they come one day a week in the evening, they can get their classes. And then we undermine this assumption that students are irresponsible or that their family always gets in the way of their programming. Well, if we can give them a plan for how to be successful, then that's a really powerful way to undermine that set of assumptions. And finally, we have a proactive and assigned advisor. So when an issue arises, they have someone, faculty as well, but an advisor they can go to and say, help me navigate this. Help me navigate this difficult faculty member, which then again puts them in the position of looking like leaders and undermining those assumptions about student parents. Does that answer the question?
And it does. And I'm so glad that you circled back to really focusing on some of the specific elements that have worked within your own program that others can consider. And that's something that I saw the chat come alive around in terms of really predictability is so important for student parents with demands on their time that are like nothing else, particularly now. So that was really helpful. I'm curious if the panelists or my other panelists or my co-moderator would like to respond to that specific question about misconceptions and combating them.
I can chime in here. I second everything that Anne has said. And what I think too is I think taking a big step back, student parent work really requires us, those of us working in higher ed, to have real conversations about who we think deserves to be in a college classroom and who we think doesn't. And I think that student parents have certainly been a population that folks do not feel deserve to be in a college classroom. And whether we say that outright or whether we have an implicit bias around that, our policies, our actions, our interactions with students certainly communicate that, or communicate that they are or are not welcome. We released a survey at Generation Hope in May around the higher ed experiences of student parents, and 40% of the students that we surveyed across the country said they felt isolated on their college campuses and didn't feel welcome. So that is huge. And I think the big things that we do and the little things that we do, the comments that we make, or the policies that we put in place about whether kids can come on campus, all sorts of things really feed into that. But I think we have to really have honest conversations about how we feel about student parents, whether or not we really do feel that they deserve to be in that college seat, and then making sure that if we're committed to that, that everything we do as an institution really reinforces that position and make sure that we're making them feel welcome. So that's one thing that I would add.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I think in conversations that we've had and through our work with Community College Women Succeed, really helping student parents see themselves on campus, see themselves as belonging. And what our panelists have talked about before, when more were on campus, and now there are very specific ways that all of our panelists are helping student parents connect with each other, helping student parents feel welcome, helping student parents feel like they not only belong at college, but will be able to succeed, which is their goal. So I really thank our panelists for bringing some specific ideas about how each of their programs are doing that. And so I do want to follow up, and I've seen a number of questions coming through, both in the chat and the Q&A panel. But I do want to give our speakers a chance to dive into this question. So we have so many folks who are on today's summit who are interested in getting started in this work. So if your institution is beginning to consider how to best support parenting students, what are 2 specific strategies that your institution could put in place in the next 90 days to get this work started? And so, Anne, I'd like to start with you.
So I'm going to steal a term that I got from Sandy Goodman, which is identifying your trusted translators in your institution who can allow your student parents to see themselves in your programming. If your programming doesn't have anything that looks like it can work for a student parent, that's where they feel and are invisible in many ways. So identifying faculty who are going to be able to communicate that they see these students who are, yes, in precarious positions, but so powerful, right? And also your advisors who can do the same thing. So those are my 2. I would start there, identify faculty and advisors who can translate that the institution cares.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anne. I love that term. And I have heard it before from Sandy Goodman, who's one of the chat moderators today. And really, how can students feel like they belong, they are in this program? So next I'd like to go to Rachel. So again, what are strategies that an institution could put in place right now within the next 3 months to better support student parents?
Yeah, so I think a question that we always think of is like, who are the student parents on our campuses? And one way of finding out who they are is surveying students to find out who is a student parent, what are their demographics, and what is campus life like for them. Once you know who your student parents are and what their needs are, you can develop programming and support around those needs. And for us, we get our student parent information from our financial aid office based on who claims a dependent on their FAFSA. So we know that we're missing students who are ineligible for FAFSA or who don't complete it, but it's a great place to start. Another suggestion is we actually implemented this last spring in the wake of COVID-19, a student parent advocacy committee. So we wanted to ensure that student parent voices were being heard on our campus. And right now it's made up of myself and another staff member and only 3 students, but it really is a starting place. And the students on our advocacy committee are working on a marketing plan to recruit more students for the spring semester. And, student parents are so busy, and sometimes they don't have the time to engage in extracurricular activities like this. But what's different about this advocacy committee in comparison to other student orgs is it's student parent led. So their understanding of what the time commitment is and what the needs of the students are. So those are 2 ideas.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And talk about this advocacy committee. I saw a lot of interest in that in the chat.
Yeah, so we had a student parent association exist at our institution like quite a few years back, and with COVID-19 and needing to do all programming virtual, our students are really missing that community aspect. So in partnership with the assistant director at the Women's Resource Center, who also happens to be a student parent and an alumni of the Life Impact Program, her and I in April were like, what can we do to get students engaged on campus while we're virtual? And so I sent out an email to a few students and was like, hey, we're thinking of starting this. Would you be interested in participating? And we got some feedback. We got 3 students to join, and now we're thinking of like what sort of events we can do to support student parents through the next semester and through summer. So a student had the idea of doing a diaper drive, of partnering with our food pantry on campus and doing a food drive specific for families with baby food and formula. And it's really cool to see our students take on leadership roles with this. From a staff perspective, we initiated it, but only after we got feedback that something was lacking. So it's been really cool to see it all unfold.
Thanks so much, Rachel. And Chelsea, thinking about what are ideas, strategies that an institution can put in place in the next 3 months, 90 days, in order to get this work started?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this when I was preparing for this presentation. And one thing I thought about was when I meet parents, I see them as a parent first, not a student, because they're bringing their children to our school. So I think looking at that from in a different lens sometimes is just even on committees that I serve on, they see parents as students and not as parent students. So that's a huge role that they carry, and just making sure that we're setting them up for success is one of the biggest things. And I guess for me, one of the things I would suggest in the next 90 days was just to survey those parents, give them an opportunity to let you know what it is they need, what they want, and determine how to engage them more. Setting up a meeting to develop a plan, a strategic plan, inviting those important people to the table, those people who are going to help make that change, make that difference, the stakeholders, the community partners, even parent leaders on campus. I really like what Rachel was talking about, having those parent leaders and implementing that also in the elementary school. I was thinking maybe, our parent involvement groups is giving them the opportunity to be those leaders and doing those things that Rachel was talking about. So I really like her idea. And if you don't have an elementary school on your campus, just making connections with the local schools, finding out where your children's your parents' children are going, where they're attending, and how to work with that school to service them outside of your campus as well as in your campus. And just making sure that the counseling departments and everybody else who works with parent students is on board with how to meet their needs and meet them where they're at.
Chelsea, that's so important in terms of really understanding that the ecosystem that our students are part of. David started in our keynote talking about the whole family. and how do you create a family-friendly campus, a family-friendly environment. So you've provided some really great actionable ideas there. I'm going to turn to some of the questions that have been asked in the question pane, and if you have more questions, please type them in. I think that Rachel was able to respond to this question, and I'm curious if others would like to provide input into it. But how are you identifying student parents to proactively reach out to them? And so, Anne, if we could hear from you, and Chelsea, you described this a little bit, but if you'd like to add in more, please feel free to do so.
Sure. So just so I'm clear on the question, it's how are we identifying student parents?
Yes.
So this is a struggle, I will say, and has been an ongoing struggle at not just my institution, but others. We are lucky enough to have had a history of reaching out to student parents. But it has always been a model of, we have an Office of Adult Services and students would come there because they saw the space, which is great, but it also doesn't help cast a wide enough net. And so we've been working towards collecting data on student parents from the point of registration and or hopefully at enrollment. This is what we're working on, but there are some technical challenges with that, and working with, we've been lucky enough to be part of the College Success for Single Mothers grant that is helping us figure out how to target, I don't love that word, how to identify student parents for the purposes of resource allocation, not just to study the group, but to be able to target resources and to understand the full student parent experience.
Thanks so much, Anne. And I know there's been a lot of activity in the chat around the Family-Friendly Campus Toolkit and other resources that are really helpful in terms of supporting understanding who student parents are, and then understanding more about them, like both you and Rachel were saying. Chelsea, in terms of identifying student parents, and I know that you are on a campus, but within that elementary school, so it's a kind of a different perspective that you shared earlier. Would you like to add to that?
No, I don't think I have much more to add to that, except, yeah, we are unique in that. However, there are student parents who do not send their children to our school. They may send them to a community school. So finding those parents would be difficult for me. But we also offer just having more campus communities programs, like child find carnivals, family night activities. Those are pulling the community and campus families to our school and helping us identify them and reach them and let them know a little bit about our school and our campus some more, and hopefully get them to join our school.
Great, thank you.
Meredith, I will quickly add, and this resource may already be in the chat, but IWPR released a really great report on data collection for student parents at the state and federal and institutional level. So that's a great place if you want to kind of just get started and get a lay of the land. It's a really great place to start.
Thanks, Nicole. I want to ask another question that we have seen in the chat, and wondering if any panelists can offer advice on how to best approach the naysayers among some faculty in regards to supporting student parents. So a mention of one size fits all, but this is not one size fits all. So how do you approach some of the naysayers, particularly when you're working with faculty on your campus? Rachel, you've talked some about how you get campus buy-in. Are there specific things that you bring up when you're engaging faculty?
Yeah, one thing that we did recently that I think was really helpful was we created, and I could share it, like a little infographic that said how to support student parents during COVID-19, and it was we ran through things like remember to be adaptable, provide empathy, resources. And with each of those categories, we gave a little example. And we had emailed it out to faculty, and I wasn't quite sure what sort of response we would get, but I did get some responses that was like, thank you for this reminder. And I know this isn't possible with like every institution, but when a student is struggling with a faculty member, sometimes a faculty member doesn't know that they're a student parent. And we have these conversations around, well, why haven't you shared? And would you like to share? And how do we do that? So I've drafted many emails with students on saying like, hey, I am a student parent. I'm different than a traditional student. I'm not asking for like, because I think that's a thing, like students don't want to be given an exception. They want to show that they're just as hardworking, that they don't need the exception, but they do. And so I think really just connecting with faculty almost individually, if not as a whole. And the more we do that, the more we're able to gain that buy-in that student parents need more support, more understanding, more empathy.
Thank you, Rachel. I think that that's important in terms of, you mentioned advocacy earlier, and I would imagine many student parents don't see themselves as advocates, but really being able to connect with their professors and describe their experience so that they can build that awareness and understanding. And I'm curious if any of the other panelists or Nicole, if you'd like to weigh in on this question, because I think it's really important. I think Anne started in the beginning of today's session with it, but would you like to add some more?
One thing that I would add, and first of all, I think it's a tough question and it's a tough thing to do, to get everybody on the same page. And to get everybody really coming from a place of support and empathy for all students in all situations, but including student parents. I think one thing that is really that is effective, and I go back to the comment around Anne's comment around connecting this to DEI work. How do we connect this to the priorities of an institution, the overall strategic priorities of an institution? That's where I think we need to have leadership, have complete buy-in and support, and making sure that student parent work is a key priority of this institution, that it's connected to DEI work that we know has become increasingly more urgent, just in what we've seen in the national racial reckoning over the past several months. This cannot be standalone. It has to really be a part of an institution's strategic priorities. It has to have the full support of the leadership of an institution, and it has to be connected to goals and priorities and tactical steps along the way. And I think that's where you will get more people, one, being aware that this is a big deal, it's important to an institution, and that there are real pushes for all of us to be doing better in this area. So that's the one thing that I would offer.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And you're right, this is a tough thing. This is not easy. It is not fast. It's at Achieving the Dream, we talk a lot about whole college solutions. And that's a whole college solution. So it's getting buy-in, understanding from across the whole institution. So that's really critically important. I do, before we finish on the topic of engaging others, I'm curious if our panelists have anything else they'd like to add there, because I think this is a critical topic, and we've seen it across the questions and the chat.
Meredith, if I can just pop in real quick and say that I've mentioned it before, but having an insider, having like a faculty, and maybe even a primary faculty member who can champion this to faculty, going to faculty association meetings and talking about it and bringing data with them. That's like, this is how many student parents there are. This is like, that has really helped. The numbers have helped in being convincing to, you know, those people who don't buy in, because it's hard to argue with the numbers.
Right. I think that that's a really critical point, Anne. Thank you. I'm curious, and this is something that's particularly relevant at this time when so many students are taking courses online and have engaged for the better part of the last year in an online or virtual and sometimes asynchronous way. And so Jill actually asked some time ago, online classes seem an obvious choice to give parents flexibility. And are there any supports for online courses specifically in your experience that, other than faculty flexibility, that you've seen that are effective? And then a sub question, are there thoughts on online courses in 8-week versus 16-week courses? And we may hear from panelists and we may see the chat come alive there too. So I'm curious if any of our panelists would like to respond to that question about online courses, particularly given the virtual environment that we're in. So I'm seeing some nods, perhaps.
I'm happy to speak to it, Meredith.
Okay, great.
I'm taking up a lot of airtime, so I was kind of sitting back. This is my wheelhouse, though, right? Like the programming and thinking about, as the department chair, how do we balance online learning? And right now we have a number of formats, and if anyone would like to reach out to me for more information about that, there are a variety of ways to think about student parents and what they need most. Online's not always best for everyone. We have a hybrid model. Actually, Parents Lead is built in a hybrid model. So they come to campus one day and the rest is online. But I will say that requires really tech savvy and strong faculty to be able to put platforms together like that. Many of us are probably seeing this in the pandemic. And we have something called a structured remote format now during the pandemic that is essentially hybrid, but those face-to-face sessions are digital. And so 7-week formats actually work really well in our program. We adult students like compressed courses as long as there's enough support and faculty who are building those courses with the student parent in mind. So again, I could talk about this all day. So if anyone wants to reach out, I'm happy to chat more.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne. And as we wrap up, so we've had a lot of questions in the chat. We've had a lot of questions in the Q&A pane. But I do want to have Sheridan McNeil weigh in from United Tribes Technical College. So, you know, we have been talking about things that may take some time, but also strategies that you can put in place in the next 90 days, in the next 3 months. As your institution really thinks about better supporting student parents. And so Sheridan, I wonder if you could weigh in as we close the session on that topic.
Hi, sure. Thanks everybody. And I think, you know, just really considering who your students are and making those short-term goals. And just real quickly, like, you know, someone had talked about how do you get faculty to buy in. Our faculty are really included in on so many different levels in decision-making processes. We really lean on them as they're our frontline people here at United Tribes. You know, we're a smaller tribal college, and so they're really connected to our students. So that's the knowledge that we really turn towards them to do. So, you know, in thinking of those short-term goals, I would just really recommend getting to know your students and developing your services around that. You know, we do course, we don't want to, survey our students to death, but they're a great resource too. And we also include our student voices on decision-making processes. I mean, we're here to develop all of these great services and programs and everything to help them succeed. So, it only makes sense to include their voices in on that decision-making process, as well as the faculties. So I would just really encourage everybody to remember that as you're planning for the next 90 days, next semester, next 5 years in your strategic plans, or, whatever it is just really, go get those voices that matter, that have to implement the work, and also for the work that you're doing. And I think that's going to make a big difference in the buy-in of different levels on your campus. And that's what we really try to do here, is provide that holistic approach. So, don't feel all of the weight on just certain groups of shoulders, right? Like the more that you can tap into on your campus, and we all know, our campuses, we know where these great resources are and things like that, but it's also getting those voices why we're doing this work.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I think those are the perfect closing statements for today's session on programs that effectively support student parents, and really thinking about a whole institution approach as well and building towards that. So I'd like to thank everyone in this session, including our speakers, my co-moderator, Nicole, and all of you for listening in. So now it's time to go to a break. This is a 20-minute break. You can grab a bite to eat, you can go outside, you can say hello to your kids who may be in the same room as you, log them into their next online class, and we'll return at 2:40 p.m. Eastern Time for policies that effectively support student parents. Thank you all.